And the second person arrested in the case of a missing Holly Springs mother will go before a judge in less than an hour. It's been more than a year since anyone has seen Monica Moynan. Jarlyn Sluss is charged with this.
On this episode, I tell a story of a young mother in North Carolina who, in April, sent her last text message to her family. For the next 3 months, everyone believed she was fine because someone kept answering on her behalf. Messages arrived regularly, warm and reassuring, explaining why she couldn't visit or meet up. But the woman typing those words wasn't her. The truth was far more sinister. Monica Moynan had already vanished, and the person pretending to be her was someone who should have protected her. Instead, he became the very thing she feared most. This is a story about how someone you love can become someone you need to escape from, and what happens when that escape is taken away. I must confess, this is not like every other stories told on this channel. As I researched into this story, I kept asking, why? Stay glued, and don't forget to support us by subscribing.
The third time I saw this going on, I went over and asked them what was going on, or I kind of asked, was my family in any danger?
They told him no. The woman who owns the home wasn't there when I went by and did not respond to a voicemail. When was the last time you saw your neighbor home?
2 or 3 days ago.
Police say their person of interest has key information. In a statement, Monica's parents write, "We trust that those in the position to act on the information they have will do so accordingly, and those who are involved in our daughter's murder will be brought to justice. Hashtag justice for Monty."
22-year-old Monica Moynan had built a life that looked ordinary from the outside. She worked as a server at a restaurant in Varina, North Carolina, raised 2 young daughters on her own, and ran a small business selling elderberry syrup for children's immune health. She called it Moni's Magic. She'd even enrolled in training to become a doula, planning to turn her passion for motherhood into a sustainable career. Friends described her as magnetic, always smiling. The kind of person who made others feel at ease the moment they met her. She dyed her hair in shades of green and blue, decorated her body with meaningful tattoos, and approached each day with optimism despite the weight she carried. But beneath that vibrant exterior, Monica was living a life most people never saw. She was trapped in a cycle she'd been trying to break for years. The father of her children, a man 2 decades older than her, had controlled and abused her since she was barely an adult. By the spring of 2019, she had finally worked up the courage to leave him for good. She had a protective order. She had distance. She had hope. And then, one night in early April, she disappeared. No one realized it for months, because the messages kept coming. Her phone stayed active. Her social media accounts appeared normal. But Monica herself was already gone. Monica met Brian Sluss when she was just 17 years old. She'd gone in for a job interview at an office supply store, and he was the one who hired her. He was 32, married with 2 children, and he lied about his age. When she found out the truth, she was already emotionally invested. Her parents, Melanie and Curtis, saw the red flags immediately. They forbade the relationship. They warned her that something wasn't right. But Monica, like so many young people, thought she knew better. She kept seeing him in secret. By the time she turned 18, she'd moved out of her parents' home and into his. Not long after, she became pregnant with their first daughter, who was born in September of 2015. A second daughter followed in August of 2018. From the outside, it might have looked like a young family trying to make things work. But those who knew Monica understood the reality. The relationship was volatile from the beginning. Brian couldn't hold down a job. He bounced from one position to another, and when money ran short, he turned to theft. Monica, meanwhile, was the one keeping everything afloat. She worked, she built a business, she planned for the future, She was the engine that kept their household running. But Brian's inability to provide wasn't the worst of it. The abuse started early and escalated over time. In May of 2016, Monica filed for a domestic violence protective order. In her complaint, she stated that he had punched her in the head and choked her against a wall. The court agreed there was danger of serious and immediate injury to both Monica and her child. Later, in 2017, she called the police and reported that he had choked her so hard she thought she was going to die. In early 2019, she called again. This time, she said he had pushed her to the kitchen floor and punched her in the head with his fist. He pleaded guilty to assault on a female in January of that year. Monica's co-workers at the restaurant noticed it too. They saw Brian show up unannounced. They saw the arguments spill into public view. One manager testified later that by late March of 2019, the bruises on Monica's body had become bigger, more widespread, harder to hide. Brian had even begun physically dragging her out of the restaurant in front of customers and staff. Monica confided in a co-worker once, saying something that would later feel like a terrible premonition. She said, "When something happens to me, I don't know what will happen to my kids. Not if, when." She already knew. Despite everything, Monica tried to build a future. She stayed focused on her daughters. She promoted her small business on social media. She looked forward to her doula training, which was scheduled to begin in late April. She wanted stability, safety, something better. And for a brief moment, it seemed like she might actually get it. She and Brian officially broke up. The protective order was in place. She was moving forward. But Brian didn't let go. He continued to stalk her. He showed up at her apartment, even though management had issued a trespass order banning him from the property. He sent endless text messages. He used their daughters as leverage, insisting he just wanted to help with childcare. Monica was trying to create distance, but he kept closing it. The last time anyone other than Brian Sluss saw Monica Moynan alive was on the evening of April 6th, 2019. She left her shift at the restaurant that night and drove home to her apartment in Holly Springs. Text message records later showed that she arrived in the early morning hours of April 7th. After that, she was never seen or heard from again. But for months, no one knew she was missing, because someone was answering her phone. Someone was sending messages to her mother, her friends, her apartment manager, her boss. Someone was keeping up the illusion that Monica was alive and well. At first, the texts seemed normal enough. Monica told her mother she was too busy to meet up. She told her boss she had the flu, then later said her car had broken down. She apologized for missing shifts at the restaurant, always with a different excuse. Her apartment manager, who had seen Monica regularly in the past, suddenly only heard from her through brief emails and text messages. The tone was polite, but distant. Monica, who had always been warm and engaged, now seemed evasive. Still, no one suspected the worst. Monica was a busy, single mother, juggling work, a business, and 2 small children. It wasn't unusual for her to go weeks without seeing family. It wasn't unusual for her schedule to be chaotic. But as the weeks turned into months, people began to notice the inconsistencies. Monica's mother, Melanie, grew concerned when her daughter stopped calling altogether. Monica had always made time for at least a phone call every couple of weeks. Now, there was only silence, punctuated by the occasional text. The apartment manager found it strange that Monica would only communicate through messages, never in person, never with a phone call. Co-workers at the restaurant wondered why someone who had never missed work was suddenly absent for weeks on end. The excuses kept piling up. and they didn't add up. In July of 2019, Melanie Tucker finally called the police and asked them to do a welfare check on her daughter. On July 23rd, officers arrived at Monica's apartment. They didn't find Monica, but they did find Brian Sluss. He was living there with their 2 young daughters. He was driving Monica's car. He had taken over her life as if she'd simply handed it to him. When police asked where Monica was, Brian had a story ready. He said she'd become addicted to heroin after starting her job at the restaurant. He claimed he'd tried to help her get clean through something he called home rehab, keeping her in the apartment and away from work. He said that on June 20th, Monica had texted him a picture of their daughters with a message that read, "I can't do this anymore." Then, he said, she left, just walked out the door and abandoned her children, her phone, her car, everything. The police didn't believe him. Nothing about his story made sense. Monica's friends and neighbors were skeptical that she'd been struggling with addiction. No one had seen any signs of it. More importantly, a mother who loved her children the way Monica did would never have left them behind. As investigators dug deeper, the inconsistencies became impossible to ignore. They discovered that Brian had been using Monica's phone to impersonate her in text messages and social media posts. The language didn't match the way she spoke. Monica always referred to her daughters by name or called them kids. Brian called them ladies, and that word showed up repeatedly in the messages sent after she disappeared. Detectives began piecing together what really happened. They examined Monica's digital footprint and found a clear break in early April. Before that, her search history reflected her real life. She looked up information about doula training, parenting tips, natural remedies. After April 7th, the searches changed completely. Suddenly, her phone was being used to browse adult websites and explicit content, nothing that matched her previous behavior. It was obvious someone else had taken control of her accounts. Then came the physical evidence. In August, investigators conducted a thorough search of the apartment Monica had shared with Brian. In the kitchen, they found traces of blood in the cracks between the floor tiles. DNA testing later confirmed it was Monica's blood. Someone had tried to clean the area with bleach, but they hadn't been thorough enough. When detectives lifted the tiles, they found dark red stains on the underside. The DNA analysis revealed it was 433 million times more likely that the blood came from Monica than from a random, unrelated person. The kitchen, investigators believed, was where she had died. Surveillance footage and witness statements added more pieces to the puzzle. A neighbor reported seeing Brian in the early morning hours, just days after Monica disappeared, around 2 or 3 in the morning, carrying 3 large black plastic bags to the dumpster.
The third time I saw this going on, I went over and asked them what was going on, or I kind of asked, was my family in any danger?
They told him no. The woman who owns the home wasn't there when I went by and did not respond to a voicemail. When was the last time you saw your neighbor home?
2 or 3 days ago.
Police say their person of interest has key information. In a statement, Monica's parents write, "We trust that those in the position to act on the information they have will do so accordingly."
Detectives also discovered that Brian had purchased new floor mats for the apartment around the same time, even though he later insisted the mats hadn't been changed. His cell phone records placed him at a Walmart in Holly Springs on April 11th, where the mats were bought with cash. Every detail pointed to a cleanup, a cover-up, an attempt to erase what had happened. Investigators also found a positive pregnancy test in Monica's bathroom. They couldn't confirm how far along she might have been, but it raised the possibility that she was pregnant when she died. If true, it meant Brian hadn't just taken one life, he'd taken 2. The more detectives uncovered, the clearer the picture became. Monica hadn't run away. She hadn't abandoned her children. She had been killed, most likely in that kitchen, and her body had been disposed of somewhere no one has yet found.
CBS 17 is digging deeper tonight in the case of a missing woman in Holly Springs who investigators do believe has been killed.
For the first time, we're talking with the Wake County District Attorney. She says they're investigating the death of Monica Moynan as a murder case. Police have identified her ex-boyfriend as a person of interest. CBS 17's Michael Hyland is live in Raleigh. And Michael, you asked the DA why charges haven't been filed.
When I talked to the DA about this, she said one of the unusual aspects of this case is that months passed between when Monica disappeared and when police got notified. Investigators say that's in part because her ex-boyfriend was using her phone and posing as her. The case of Monica Moynan is unusual in the amount of evidence investigators have revealed in search warrants like these without charging anyone. To get some insight, I talked with Wake County District Attorney Lauren Freeman. To be clear, is this being investigated as a murder case specifically?
At this point, yes.
Moynan went missing in April. After that, investigators say her ex-boyfriend, Brian Sluss, used her phone to communicate as her and even told people she was a drug addict, something her family denies. Holly Springs police call him a person of interest. Does this hinge on either finding Monica Moynan's body or someone confessing to killing her?
No. It's certainly unusual for us to bring homicide charges where we don't have the victim's body, but it is not unprecedented.
Are police still confident that when you all do get to the point of issuing any arrest warrants that you'll be able to find the person or people in case they decide to take off?
You know, this is not a case where we have specific concerns of people of interest disappearing.
Moynan's family has used the hashtag #JusticeForMoni on social media, saying they believe she's a victim of domestic violence.
Then came another shocking development. In May of 2020, police made a second arrest. Brian's ex-wife, Jarlyn Sluss, was charged with accessory after the fact to first-degree murder and obstruction of justice. Phone records showed that Brian had contacted Jarlyn on April 7th, the day Monica disappeared, and the two had remained in regular communication ever since. Investigators believed Jarlyn had helped Brian maintain the charade. She allegedly impersonated Monica during a phone call with the apartment manager and may have assisted Brian in fleeing the area temporarily, though he eventually returned to the apartment. Jarlyn later agreed to testify against Brian in exchange for a plea deal. Whatever loyalty she once felt toward him, it wasn't enough to keep her silent when facing her own charges. In April of 2022, Brian Sluss stood trial for the murder of Monica Moynan. It was a case unlike any other in Wake County history because there was no body. Prosecutors had to convince a jury that Monica was dead and that Brian had killed her, all without the most fundamental piece of evidence. They laid out the entire history of their relationship, the documented abuse, the protective order, the assault convictions. They showed the blood evidence, the altered internet searches, the fabricated text messages. They presented testimony from co-workers who had witnessed Brian's violence, from neighbors who had seen him acting suspiciously, from family members who knew Monica would never have abandoned her children. Brian took the stand in his own defense. He admitted to lying, to being deceptive, to pretending to be Monica after she disappeared. But he insisted he hadn't killed her. He claimed their relationship had been volatile, but that he wasn't the one who ended her life. He said Monica had left on her own, and he didn't know where she was. His timeline kept shifting. At one point, he said he'd last seen her on Father's Day, claiming she'd made him dinner, but no one else had seen or heard from her after April 7th. His stories, as the prosecutor pointed out, didn't fit on any calendar. He'd made up so many versions of events that he couldn't keep them straight. The trial lasted 3 weeks. On April 28th, 2022, the jury returned a verdict: guilty of first-degree murder. The courtroom erupted. Monica's mother, Melanie Tucker, cried and cheered. Her family embraced each other. feeling a sense of relief they hadn't experienced in years. Brian showed no emotion. He was sentenced immediately to life in prison without the possibility of parole. This case marked the first time in Wake County that someone was convicted of murder without the victim's body being found. It was also the first successful prosecution under a North Carolina law known as Britny's Law. Passed in 2017, the law allows prosecutors to use a defendant's prior domestic violence convictions as evidence of premeditation, making it easier to secure first-degree murder charges in cases involving intimate partner violence. The law was named after Britny Puryear, a 22-year-old woman from Fouquet, Virginia, who was shot and killed by her boyfriend in 2014 after years of abuse. Her family fought to change the legal system so that other victims might see justice. Monica's case became proof that their efforts had made a difference. But for Monica's family, the victory was bittersweet. Brian has never revealed where he disposed of her body. Monica's mother now raises her 2 granddaughters, stepping back into the role of parent when she should have been enjoying time as a grandmother. She described her daughter as vibrant, magnetic, strong-willed, and deeply loved. She said that a piece of their family puzzle is gone forever. Monica's stepfather spoke about the anguish of knowing she's still out there somewhere, her spirit yearning to be found. Detectives have exhausted every lead. They've searched properties, analyzed soil samples, followed tips, executed search warrants as recently as 2 weeks before the trial. But Monica has never been recovered. Her family can't lay her to rest. They can't visit a grave. They can't say a final goodbye. Brian Sluss holds the answers, and he refuses to speak. Perhaps it's his last attempt at control, his final act of cruelty. Or perhaps he simply can't face what he's done. Monica Moynan was 22 years old when her life was stolen from her. She was a mother, a daughter, a friend, a dreamer. She had plans. She had goals. She was working toward a better future for herself and her children. She deserved safety. She deserved peace. She deserved to live. Instead, she became another name in the heartbreaking list of women killed by someone who claimed to love them. Her story is a reminder that domestic violence doesn't always end when the relationship does. Sometimes, the most dangerous moment is when a victim tries to leave.